Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Martha Byanyema. I work for the Common Market for Eastern Southern Africa. I have spent a number of years working with industry on food safety, but I've also worked with governments, and now I'm working with 19 countries, but looking at food safety mainly from a trade perspective. So I'm pleased that I've been invited to this because I think I found it quite exciting that for the first time, not for the first time, but that food safety is being brought up, high up on the research and development agenda. Because a lot of the food safety risks that we are talking about are unseen risks, and they are silent. We always call them silent killers, because you don't see them with the naked eye. Their impacts are long-term, whether on health, and they are more visible on the trade impact when they have a huge economic impact, like an export ban. But many times it's not seen and it's not visible. In terms of challenges, from our own experience, the major challenge with food safety has been a capacity challenge. Capacity both across the public sector and the private sector. For governments to be able to understand the extent of the problem, the extent of human exposure, and to be able to have science-based policies, regulations that are going to address a problem appropriately, a food safety problem appropriately. For industry, the biggest problem has been mitigating the problem with appropriate technology that's cost-effective, that's both is feasible in terms of cost, but is feasible also and practical in solving the problem. So we find that in terms of research, academic research has been very useful, but I want to agree with IFPRI that perhaps we need to look more at applied research. Research that's aimed at solving a problem. Research that's looking at a problem and designing an intervention to tackle that problem. Capacity for risk assessment to inform policies, regulations across our countries has been almost not there. So in terms of research, it would also be very useful if we looked at risk profiling for the sectors that have been prioritized. How would you profile the risk, and how would you bring out this evidence in a manner that governments can use it to inform their own regulations and enforcement mechanisms, but also industry can use it to put in place appropriate systems for managing the problem, and also using the appropriate technologies. If I can draw on some examples when we talk about capacity challenges, you'll find we have, like, for example, 2 countries who are having a trade war on milk. But without naming the countries, you'll find that the focus is more on differences in the standards that you're applying in the country. The standard you have for raw milk is different from the standard I have. From that perspective, we can't trade. But from a risk assessment, food safety perspective, we know that it is the traded product that we should be focusing on. If I'm trading of processed products like UHT milk or fermented milk, you should be looking at the safety of that product to the consumer, and not necessarily the differences in standards of the raw milk that we are procuring to process the product. So the understanding and using risk-based approaches to even resolve market access issues is lacking, is not there. Again, you find that many of the food safety risks that we are dealing with are transboundary in nature. They move with the product as it crosses borders. And therefore, when countries have variations in their national food safety systems, which is basically about, the standards, the regulations, the inspection systems, the laboratory competencies, it becomes a problem because the importing country says, I have a stronger system, more credible system, I can't trade with you. So the kind of tools that should be there to use, for instance, to establish equivalence, mutual recognition, are not understood, have not been translated into practice, into tools that our governments can understand and be able to harmonize their system based not on sameness, but on equivalence. If I also could draw another example on two countries that are dealing in horticulture products, one country unable to trade with the other because you're not addressing the phytosanitary risks of concern, but also the food safety risks of concern. Two countries were having that misunderstanding. And when we came in with an approach of, you may not be the same, but can you work together to determine the risk, to assess the risk, put in place management options that are agreeable to you, systems approaches that are drawing on your phytosanitary management, food safety management to mitigate this risk appropriately. It took just under 1 year of capacity problem, targeting on the specific problem, and within a couple of months they were able to resolve the problem and resolve the market access issue. The groundnut story that Zambia was talking about, smallholders usually do not have the tools, the knowledge, the skills to mitigate the problem, so they are closed out of the market. But in Zambia, now it is the exporters who are actually helping to mitigate the problem and drawing more smallholders into a market that had been closed for a while. They are able to do that because they are bringing in an investment to mitigate and relying on smallholders to have the volumes that they need to be cost effective, be cost effective in the way they are managing the problem, but they are able now to meet the EU standard and bulk the product and get into the market. So in terms of even the applied research, I think it's very critical that we involve industry and the private sector to be able to leverage the resources that we need that governments may not have. So basically, that's my intervention now.